Good evening and welcome. Welcome to St. Joseph University Church. We're happy to have you, and we're happy to have this event, which is so significant, really so important for our time, for us, for our lives, for our future, for our community, for our country, really. Usually, I'm not at a loss for words. Sister Jeremy used to say, you just pull the string and I talk, okay? But I've been asked to say a prayer. 10 seconds ago, I was asked to say a prayer. So we're going to open our minds and our hearts to the Holy Spirit and ask the Spirit to come and guide us. Not only to guide us this evening, to guide us for this discussion, to guide us for this reflection, but to guide our lives, to guide our values, to guide our vision, to guide our decisions, so that we might create a community for everyone, a community for all of our sisters and brothers, where no one is excluded, where everyone belongs, where everyone is at home. We live in a world where there are so many barriers for so many false reasons. So we ask the Holy Spirit tonight to inspire us, but not only to inspire us, but to give us courage to think, to courage to act, and to courage to live the gospel and to live for others. Almighty God, you are the source of all life and all goodness. We make our prayer in your name. You are God forever and ever. Amen.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the second session in this three-part series on race, privilege, and power in Buffalo, New York, a faith perspective, and which is being hosted tonight at St. Joseph University Church, which happens to be my home parish. So we at St. Joe's welcome all of you to this inspiring program, which again is being sponsored by Elam Christian Fellowship, St. Joseph University Catholic Church, Trinity Episcopal Church, and Voice Buffalo. My name is Cecile Mathis Dorlier, and I was born and raised in Buffalo, and I'm an attorney practicing family law with an office in downtown Buffalo. And I was the moderator for Session 1, which was held last Thursday at Elam Christian Fellowship, and I will also be the moderator for this evening, as well as next week's final session being held at Holy Trinity Episcopal Church, located at 371 Main Street, Buffalo, New York, 14202. I'm sorry, what did I say? Delaware. Yeah, Delaware. There is abundant parking located behind the church, and you can turn into the parking lot from Franklin Street. If you are in Tupper going west, turn right onto Franklin Street, and the parking lot is on your first left, and there is signage. Or if you are in Tupper Street traveling east, turn left onto Franklin and the first left into the parking lot. First, I just want to emphasize once again that the major goal of this committee is to inspire coalitions of others from the faith community to work towards significant change in our society's historic relationship, specifically between blacks and whites, and right here in Buffalo, New York. Our group is shrouded in faith, so I searched for a meaningful chapter and verse that could be used to set a tone for the entire series. So I found and quoted a verse from Ephesians 4:3, and to make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace by living in peace with others. A melodic scripture that I impart to you this evening, in keeping within the theme of the entire endeavor, that is peace and unity, is again from Psalms 133:1. Behold, how good and how pleasant it is to dwell together in unity. Before moving right into tonight's presentation, I'm going to give a brief synopsis of Session 1's presentations so that those of you who aren't able to attend can get a sense of what transpired in Session 1. During last week's sessions, 4 panelists shared and told their personal stories about how their lives were impacted with respect to race, privilege, and power. And it was through the telling of their stories, each in their own way illustrated how race, privilege, and power affected their lives. As moderator, I began by telling and sharing of my observation and experience with power, privilege, and race. My perception about power as I was growing up, in my mind, the power brokers were either white or men, and consequently, there was no space for Black women within the realm of power. That is a significant observation in today's times, where Black women are at the bottom of most statistics. If you do a rank and file, you have white men, you have white women, you have Black men, and you have women at the bottom. For example, pay equity, morbidity and death, the rate of infant mortality among Black women, and the identities that were historically imposed on Black women's bodies. The import here is that were historically imposed on Black women's bodies. The import here is that when referring to who Black people are and what Black people need, it must be understood that Blackness is multi-layered, depending on whether you are a Black male, a Black female, or if one is a biracial male or a biracial female. Then I appeal to the need for Black people to commit to this struggle and not to just rely on white people to figure it out. I quoted James Baldwin, and I think it bears repeating. He says, "It must be remembered that the oppressed and the oppressor are bound together within the same society. They accept the same society. They accept the same criteria. They share the same beliefs. They both alike depend on the same reality." So if we as Black people want to change our trajectory, then we have to partake in the process. I sent a message out to educators, both religious and secular, to consider the content of materials and images when teaching. I exampled the difference in the way in which Southern Black children experience and honor important African American historical figures within the school building itself, as most of their schools were named after prominent African Americans. So Southern Black students have the opportunity to absorb the spirit and essence of their ancestors, which contributes to their self-identities. Deacon Jerome Wright from Elam Christian Fellowship spoke first as to how happy and elated that he personally felt that Blacks and whites had gathered and were sitting together, learning together, and committing to make changes together. Natalia Rice spoke next. Natalia is biracial with a white mother and a Black father. Her experience with race cannot be empathized by either Blacks or whites because it is not their experience. She spoke of how complicating and exhausting it all is and how it feels to constantly be stuck between two worlds, basically at every moment, and also how some people make assumptions about her identity. Leticia Randall spoke to how she and her family were treated when they moved into a predominantly white neighborhood in North Buffalo. Neighbors actually asked her family to move out. She also spoke of a white girlfriend from this neighborhood that she hung out with from time to time, but was never welcomed or invited into her home. Hugh Russ, prominent attorney in Buffalo, New York, who spoke candidly about how very hard he had to work to achieve all of his accomplishments. But Hugh was equally as forthcoming as to how his whiteness, privilege, and some level of power were instrumental in his journey to success, and about the legacy of lawyers on both sides of his family. Hugh also noted how at one point a simple phone call was all that it took for him to obtain something of which he and others less fortunate were previously denied. Now tonight, session 2 will focus on the shared experiences of the 4 panelists as they tell and share stories about their public lives. Again, how race, privilege, and power informed and continues to inform their public spaces. The third and final session will be held on October 20th at Trinity Episcopal Church. And the last session is aptly called Opportunities for Action, Troubling the Waters. A featured speaker at this session will be Dr. Henry Louis Taylor. Dr. Taylor is the noted director and I believe founder of the Center for Urban Studies at the University of Buffalo, and he has written extensively and spoken on the manner in which persistent racialized and structural policies and practices have negatively affected and continues to impact the Black community in Buffalo. There will also be some closing remarks from Reverend Denise Walden Green, Executive Director of Voice Buffalo, who will speak about calls for action as to current and future opportunities, and she will also introduce Buffalo's own first poet laureate, Julian Haynesworth, who will take us on a very comforting and inspiring poetic journey. Reverend Matt Lincoln from Trinity Episcopal Church will assist in fielding questions from the audience to Dr. Taylor and the panelists who spoke at sessions 1 and 2. Reverend Matt will also offer closing thoughts and prayers, so we hope to see all of you that you can attend next week's session, which also begins at 7. Just a few reminders, there will be a question and answer session after the conclusion of the last panelist this evening, who will be speaking this evening. Also, please mute or turn off your cell phones. Pay attention to the emergency exits to the back. Relax, listen, and learn. 2 of our panelists, Natalia Rice and Hugh Russ, had prior commitments when were unable to physically appear, but we will be able to hear their discussions about their public lives in the past, present, and future through the wondrous Zoom technology. So, the first panelist this evening will be Leticia Randall, a native Buffalonian, and she will discuss some of her challenges while trying to navigate this thing called race. Leticia?
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Just bear with me here. My name is Leticia Randall, and I am too a native of Buffalo, New York. I actually grew up just 3 blocks from here. I would never imagine standing here in this church speaking in front of a congregation about race, privilege, and power. I'm thankful to be here. I am a wife, mother, daughter, a sister, a cousin, an aunt, and a friend. I recently became an international best-selling author of a book called Broken Crayons Still Color, Life After. And guess what? I was on the wrong side of the law. Yep, wonderful, amazing, happy, kind me. I made a mistake at some point in my life. And this happened over 24 years ago, and boy, has it made an impact on me. The charges and the number of years that I was facing in prison were draconian. I take full responsibility for my choices, but because of my color, the color of my skin and my socioeconomic status, I was defamed, and I was not treated the same. I was also told that I could not go to school to pursue my dreams of becoming a nurse. My probation officer failed to be honest and tell me that I was still able to go to school. Now, getting a job, that was another story. After this happened to me, I could not get a job for a very, very long time. Every time I applied for a job, I didn't get a call because I had to mark the box. I cried so much, because I knew that because I was Black and because I was poor and could not afford a lawyer, that my outcome was different. We have all heard of, or we know someone that has experienced racial injustice. But God is so merciful, and so is the document that my judge granted me, which is a certificate of relief from disabilities. That certificate allowed me to still, get a job and work in the community. The only thing I could not do was run for office, and I don't want to be a politician. So I was okay with that. A disability, I thought, wow, am I really disabled? So I was defamed because of a choice, and I was clueless until I started to educate myself. So since then, I became a motivational speaker, a mentor, and a mindset coach, and I also work with youth. So I'm not so bad after all. Needless to say, I survived, and I did not give up, and I created a life for my family and myself. Racism, privilege, and power I have encountered since the beginning of time, and for me to deal with the harsh realities and the modern-day slavery, I always refer to a scripture, Proverbs 3:5. Trust in the Lord with all thy heart, and lean not into thy own understanding. This is a scripture I hold dear because I don't understand racism, and I don't think I ever want to, because I feel like we're all here on this earth, and we're all human, and we deserve to be treated equally. There are many examples of disparities, that Black people or African Americans deal with, from health inequalities to segregation. Buffalo is like the second segregated city in the United States. We also suffer from a lack of education and police brutality. So with drink some water. With the health inequalities, I did some research, and there was a study in 2016 that reported half of the medical students that were going to medical school to become doctors assumed that Black people's skin were thicker and that we were less sensitive, which meant that we could tolerate more pain. It's really unfortunate. Also, according to an MD, they stated that all myths regarding perceptions of pain should be debunked and baselined and outdated. They should. We need to expose and look at racism for what it is, and look at power and privilege for what it is, and make change. There was also a survey conducted by Henry J. Kaiser from the Family Foundation and the Undefeated. 7 out of 10 Black men, or Black people, stated that they had dealt with unfair treatment in healthcare. We know from the rise of COVID, many people died, and a lot of it was due to healthcare disparities. There's a plethora of data here and beyond, right? So we can look up this stuff, and we can, really dig deep and see where the problem lies and where it all started. Housing segregation, Excuse me. Housing segregation is serious here in Buffalo, New York. If you know, we have the West Side, we have the East Side, we have North Buffalo, where I grew up, and we have downtown. So if you look around, there's Latino here, blacks here, whites here, right? And then we have now a lot of immigrants and refugees coming to Buffalo, New York. This place is like a melting pot. We have UB College, which is right next door, UB South in the north. So a lot of people come here looking for the American dream, not realizing that this place can be so segregated and racist. The educational system is failing our Black youth in a major way. They're passing them to the next grade without the education needed to prepare them for a better life as they grow up. This is hard for me to grasp, the fact that all children aren't afforded the same education. Why is that? Why is it that a child who is born into a family never knowing anything about life because they're brand new, right? You're born, they say, a blank slate. And because of their social economic status or where they grow up and who their parents are, they're not afforded real education. There's so much missing in the system. And just like Cecile said, I urge you all to, if you are educators or if you know educators, to be very honest with your students and teach them about this life we live, because you can only be shielded for but so long, right? The banking system is also disparities. There's certain mortgage loans you can't get depending on the bank that you go to. There's redlining, and it's in full effect. I thought I would share the definition of redlining with you all. Redlining is a practice of restricting financial and essential services to residents of a particular area based on their race or ethnicity. The federal government and banks prohibited granting students, consumers, businesses, housing, vehicles, and personal loans to minorities by refusing them or raising interest rates. How sad. How sad. In addition, when it comes to the workplace, I myself have suffered some discrimination and some race and power and privilege that was bestowed on me. I worked for this company, and I won't say the name, but it's reputable. And during my time there, I cried a lot. I guess I'm a crier. It's okay, I'm okay with that. So they did not like me, and I worked with the majority of people that I worked with were white. And I was my happy self going to work, doing my job, and the clients loved me, but my coworkers didn't. So they actually went so deep as to attempt to get me fired, try and get me fired, and have me in the office talking to the director. But anywho, I prevailed, I stayed strong, and I ended up leaving the job, but I didn't get fired. I've really experienced a lot of racism, and I don't have enough time to talk about everything I've experienced, but I'm here in hopes that we can work together. And lastly, police brutality. The horrific event that just happened May 14th at Tops Friendly Market in the predominantly Black neighborhood, where this man killed 10 people, and wounded 3 innocents. It was aired for the entire world to see. This shows the outright hatred for people of color. We must do so much more work. We've come a long way, we have, but we still have a long way to go. Racism, privilege, and power, it has been ingrained in the souls, mindsets, and the actions for many decades. How much longer do we sit back and watch this madness before we analyze below the surface. My aspirations are to continue helping people, all people, women, kids, young, old, and continue my life coaching business and my mentoring. I would like to work with community organizers and community and organizations to help with the recidivism rate, and injustice. I would like to leave you tonight with a few tips to take with you. 1, learn how to master your mindset. We all know right from wrong, good and bad. We have to unlearn learned behaviors, things that were embedded in us and ingrained from a child. 2, understand the importance of self-care. I urge all of you to look at self-care. Look into it and see how much it means for one person, okay, for yourself. And then lastly, create your own destiny. You have what it takes to create your own destiny. I'm sending you all love, light, and hope, and blessings. Thank you.
Our next speaker will be on video, and it will be Hugh Russ. Great.
Tonight, remotely. Last week, I was present at Elam Church when several of us shared our views on racism in society. In particular, I talked about my own racism, that I am a racist, that my racism, whether conscious or not, is a result of my own white privilege and the structural racism system that underlies our society. There have been times in my life when I have consciously benefited from that system and have known that others less fortunate do not benefit from that system. And there also have been times, I confess, when I have not really thought about it and I just kind of gone on because it's easier and faster and simpler. So how does that translate into my life today? While I have thought about my white privilege on and off for a long time, it's only really in the last couple of years that it has hit home for me. And what has really hit home for me is the disparity between what I have, what I am able to access, programs I am able to participate in, institutions I'm able to get into and to work into, and the disparity between others who don't have those opportunities. Most recently, I was president of the Erie County Bar Association, and I made it my #1 priority for my term as president to work on racial justice issues. I had started before May 14th. May 14th only brought home how important the work is and helped me to stress that work. But the way structural racism or white privilege has influenced my life is probably most prominently in my job as a lawyer. I work in a firm downtown that is prominent, has influence, has contacts, and there have been times when I have relied upon those to either advance myself or to advance a case I was working on. Our clients tend to have means and tend to be members of the same structural racist society that I am, in other words, white, and white people of means. And the legal justice system is designed not, as you might believe, to help everyone equally, but rather I think it's designed to benefit those who have means and access. So some of the things that I've been working on, I'm sure you know that the vast majority of lawyers in Buffalo and indeed in the United States are white, and that the number of minority lawyers, the number of African American lawyers that we have in our system is much lower than the population. So I think one of the most important things we can do is to, as they say, open the pipeline. That is, get people interested earlier than when they want to apply to law school. And that means probably going as far back as high school and starting internships, starting educational programs, starting mentorship programs, encouraging people to apply to college. And then while in college, the same kinds of programs, internships, mentorships, to apply to law school. Then when people get in law school, the bar exam is something that I think everyone acknowledges disproportionately adversely affects minority students as opposed to white students. So I think we need to do mentoring and training and helping with the bar exam. Also, the bar exam is expensive. I think we need to help support financially minority students who want to take the bar exam. And then for actual employment, we just recently had, at the end of August, we had a job fair for minority students who wanted legal jobs. We had 30-something employers come from around the state, and we had 100-something minority law students come, and we've been trying to match jobs with applicants. Believe it or not, even in New York City, that was the first one ever. I think the solution, if there is a solution to racism, is affording opportunities and supporting opportunities. I know the question I always hear is, well, if I give a black student a place in law school, that means that my own child, a white student, doesn't have a place. It's a zero-sum game question that if I afford an opportunity, I lose an opportunity. I just think that's wrong, and I think that's the kind of thinking that we have to change. I am grateful that you are here tonight, and I'm grateful that you're even listening to people like me. I think that's the first step. As we proceed in this series, we will come up with some more concrete ideas that we can pursue to advance the cause of justice, racial justice in our society. But as you are progressing through the night, you will see that we have some really amazing people here who are very thoughtful and who are, frankly, an inspiration to me. So thanks for your time tonight, and I will see you in person next week. Thanks.
Thank you. He was great. Next, we're going to have Jerome Wright.
No, Natalia.
Oh, Natalia's next? I thought we, okay. Sorry.
So I mentioned many times during the last session that my racial identity was something that I could never really get away from in my life. It was something that I saw with my family. It was something that I saw in education, and it was formative in just the person that I was and the person that I've ultimately become. I would say that I have, to this date at least, really dedicated the majority of what my career is to addressing injustices, learning more about how race has come to be as a construct that's made real, that's something that defines our lived experiences, that creates oppression, that creates privilege, and the difference between who I am now versus who I was at, for example, 6 years old, upset that my hair had been cut off. And if you're at session 1, you understand the context behind that one, is that rather than seeing it just as an individual issue, I've come to view it as something that's more systemic, something that really is at a higher level, a macro level, affecting so many individuals in different ways on account of the different identities that we all bring to the table. But it's something that at the end of the day is just naturally, as a human in society, you're not going to be able to escape the grasp of race, the grasp of racism, just because it really is so fundamental to all that we navigate in the day-to-day. So I would say that the kind of transition from just a personal experience with race to more of a professional and academic understanding of it happened in high school, actually, where I had to pursue a project that was at the intersection of something that I was passionate about in history, and something that I was incredibly passionate about was understanding civil rights movements and the feminist movement and human rights in the context of the United States, and just understanding how that came to be and how individuals navigated it. But what I was really interested in understanding was, how did Black women, for example, navigate the sexism that was presented in the civil rights movement, because it was prevalent, but also the racism that would have been present in the women's rights movement, the feminist movement. And where do you go when this space is for you, in terms of the civil rights movement being for racial liberation and the feminist movement being for the liberation from sexism and from gender oppression? Where do you go when those spaces aren't fully for you? And that's something that I think translated into how I felt. Whereas somebody who was biracial, I never really felt that any of the spaces I navigated were fully for me. I saw myself a little bit here and a little bit there, but all in all, it was still very isolating. And in a lot of ways, that was because of the differences and the isolation and just that sense of loneliness that's created because of the construct of race. And so when I went to college, after having become really interested in learning more about civil rights, human rights, identity, intersectional identity, I started studying race and literature and gender and sexuality and just social identity politics in general. And I woke up to this field of diversity, equity, and inclusion that I had never realized was a thing. Everyone was telling me that as an English and sociology major, you're not going to be employed. This is not a good move. You should probably be studying science or math. I don't know what kind of job that you think you're going to get. And then I found out, well, actually, there's a whole field that is growing that's always been here, but now there's a name for it, that you can put that passion for wanting to operationalize that oppression that you've navigated to make the world a better place, or at least start to make some system change here and there. So when I was in college, I just started to get way more involved in talking about these topics, but more professionally. I traveled abroad to Madrid. I lived in Madrid for a little bit and saw that racism isn't something that's just limited to the context of the United States. Racism is global just because of the global nature of chattel slavery, the global nature of this is something that started in Africa and really has permeated the entire world, of the removal and the violence that happened there. And so when I went to Spain and I saw that it looks a little bit different here, but it's still something that is rooted in those same concepts of what race is, of what racism is, it made me see how deep this really is. Not that I hadn't already understood that racism is something that permeates every single institution and every single system that we navigate on a daily basis, but this is dangerous, this is powerful, and one of my favorite quotes is, awareness leads to accountability. So now that you're aware that this is something that permeates, what are you going to do about it? How can you work with your skill set, with the privileges that you have, to make a difference in this? And that is kind of the philosophy that I've adopted ever since. How can I use my privilege? How can I use my skill set to work towards bridging differences, bridging gaps, boosting education so other people can understand the reality of what we're navigating here, so that ultimately at the end of the day, we can hopefully make this world a better place. Ever since then, my first job, or one of my first jobs, was as a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant executive, where I was really taking the lead in a local nonprofit to work towards diversity, equity, and inclusion in our workforce, but also with the youth that we served in our local community. Since then, I really have made it my mission to want to spread knowledge and awareness, but in a way that's realistic and tangible, that individuals can see their individual role in this big construct that we're all navigating to this day. Because it's so easy to say, you know, this doesn't affect me. I didn't own any slaves, my grandparents didn't do this, and so I don't have a role in this. Like, I'm a good person. But I think, as Hugh said in our last session, this isn't about being good versus bad. This is about being a human and wanting to work towards just the good for humanity. And so regardless of what side you're on, how can we make sure that everyone can see the role that they play, again, in this ultimate goal of eradicating the disparities, of breaking down the barriers, of making sure that we are achieving true equity in our school systems, in incarceration, in just in the medical profession, because there's so many disparities even happening right there in race-based medical discrimination. I mentioned in the last session as well, my dad has multiple sclerosis, and it's impossible for me to separate that reality of seeing my dad as a Black man with a debilitating disease living in poverty, not having rights, not having resources that he needed in order to live a healthy and happy life, and to not make that part of my career, to not make advocacy and working for disability justice and racial justice something that is incredibly important to me. And so now my next step is law. I want to go to law school in order to be equipped with the legal background, because as you get deeper and deeper into what this reality is, first of all, once you see it, you can't unsee it. It is everywhere in the air that we breathe. But what I want to do is learn more about what are the roots of this? What is the legality behind the discrimination here? And what power do we have as individuals to come together and break down those disparities and just, again, move towards that vision of equity, of liberation, of a world where individuals can be them and not be defined by the color of their skin, not be defined by the racial identity that they were ascribed, and just live a life where the outcomes and their jobs and their health status aren't determined by these social constructs. And so, yeah, it can be very heavy. It can be difficult. I definitely love vacations, because those are moments for me to check out, at least for a little bit, but it's important to me. And I think that once an individual can see, even if it's a small role that they can play in this broader goal, we can work towards this together, and it will become realistic, and I have hope for that. So thank you all once again. Wish I were there with you in person.
Okay, now I have it right. Our final speaker will be Jerome Wright.
Good evening. Normally they would say they save the best for last, right? I'm not going to say that tonight. First of all, I want to take this moment to thank many of you who come out. Whenever you put together something like this, the concern is always, who's going to show up, how many people. And I've learned in the past that you don't count the numbers, you make the numbers count. So it's the people who show up, who are there, that you give the flowers to, but you also give the marching papers to, because they're the ones who are going to do the work. All the other people would jump in later on, and that's fine by them, but by my standards, you are the most important people in this discussion right now. What we're talking about is facts, and we got the empirical data to support it. But the real fact of the matter is that you showed up today because you're sick and tired of being sick and tired of what's going on. That racism has been an impediment to your own growth and development, the growth and development of this country, and that racism has put an indelible negative imprint on who we are as a people, as human beings. Now, this is from a faith perspective. So there are some scriptures, and I'm glad to be in the church where I can say these scriptures and nobody's rolling their eyes or feeling some kind of way offended because, you know, it's about God. But if we remember why we were put here from day one, it was to be in service to God through serving one another. And so somewhere along the line, we've got so far off that path that now we have a social construct known as race that has divided and conquered us for far too long. And it is high time that we take back our power and the mantle of our humanity. To be a human, H-U-M-A-N, is just a compound word. That means hue, H-U-E, and man. If you know anything about hue, it means shade, color, tint. So it is man with many tints. Difference. The Lord is the greatest proponent of diversity. Not a blade of grass, not a raindrop, not a flake of snow, not a human being are all the same. Everybody's different because God in his infinite wisdom knew that diversity was truly the spice of life, as we like to throw around. But we didn't turn different and diversity into better or worse, good or bad, worthy or unworthy. And I am asking us today, we are asking us today to reclaim our humanity. Let me tell you something. I didn't even know, you know, I'm up here, I got these glasses on, I know my wife hates them. I got these shades on, I'm looking like, you know, a couple of people say you're looking dapper and all that. But actually, on the inside, under this outfit, I am no different than you. And that's a fact. I'm telling you, I am no different than you. And until we get back to that understanding that the difference is a positive and not a negative, we will continue to suffer under the tyranny and the real pain of racism. Leticia said that she read somewhere and knows somewhere that Buffalo, the quote city of good neighbors, is one of either the third or the sixth most segregated communities in the country. So I guess the good neighbors part only means what neighborhood you living in. Yeah, because in my neighborhood it doesn't mean that. It means that we're struggling from sun up to sundown sometimes to make ends meet. Where somebody else, like Hugh so eloquently stated, that he was a racist. And people say, oh, you call me a racist is negative. Well, the underlying connotation is negative because anytime you judge anything on one single factor, you got a problem. So if it's race, that's a problem. But beyond that, the fact of the matter is if you think that by the virtue of the skin color of your skin, that you are better than anybody, black, white, or anything else, then you are suffering for what we call in this country mental illness. Now, y'all laughing. You must know some mentally ill people. Because the supposition is that your skin color determines who you are. And we already know that that's not a fact. So why do we continue to buy into it? I found out where Buffalo was, and I hate to admit this, but I was in prison for quite a while. And while I was in there, they said I was going to Buffalo to testify at a case, a racial discrimination case, against a correctional facility known as Elmira. Going to Buffalo. Now, I don't even know Buffalo's in New York. I'm telling you, because when I think of Buffalo, I think of the Midwest, where buffaloes roam. I didn't know that they roamed over here too. Now, and that's how ignorant we can be sometimes about our own history and things in life. So I did not know. So they sent me to Buffalo I didn't know it was as segregated as it was. I didn't know it was as racially tarnished as it is. But I went to this facility to testify. And because I was testifying about officers and administrators using the N-word, subjecting me and people who look like me to disparities in housing, disciplinary, and everything else, I was told by officers sitting in the crowd, I'm going to get you because you're a snitch. You're snitching on my fellow brothers and sisters. These are officers who live in the city of good neighbors. Not only did they tell me what they was going to do, I have the physical evidence, if you can see my hand, where I was beaten along with 7 other of my comrades, beaten, not me within an inch of my life, but one of them within an inch of their lives. All because of racially, we represented something to them that was negative. I had a whole thing here written out, and believe me, I haven't followed none of it yet. I'm going to read something from here in a minute, just to make sure you know that I did do some research on this. But somebody said, and I don't know which one it was, said, Hugh, I believe it was, said, live the gospel. We call ourselves Christian. We go to church, we tithe, we offer, we do volunteer stuff. We sit on that board, this board, and the other. But what are we doing about the real scourge of this community? And that's racism, because let me tell you something. If you think it does not impact you because you're living in your gated community or your enclave in the North Buffalo, South Buffalo, or wherever else, the reason why crime is high, the reason why drugs are out of rampant, the reason why the social ills that are going to impact your lives are happening is because we allow the scourge of racism to continually rear its ugly head and we do nothing. I'm not saying it's going to rear its head, but we do nothing. And as a Christian, you're called on, what would Jesus do? What did Jesus do when he saw wrong? All we talk about is throwing the money tables over. That ain't all he did. He revolutionized. Listen, remember, it was Jew and Gentile until Christ said we are all one. I'm not going to preach now. I'm not going to preach. I was about to go there. If I preach it, I got to send an offering around. Y'all don't want that, right? All right, so I ain't going to preach. But what I am going to say is, I've lived in this community. I'm not a native Buffalonian, so maybe my jaundiced eyes sees things differently than somebody who's been there all the time. But I saw the Buffalo Billion come here in 2009 and 10 and get siphoned away, and nothing happened to Jefferson or the East Side community. I saw Tesla get $850 million, and in my book, that's $1 billion. I don't care what you say. Hey, give me $850 million, I'm a billionaire, right? $850 million, and still no change in my community and anywhere. Then we had the pandemic billions that's still flowing now. No change. We keep saying 5/14, May 14th. Let's call it what it is. The massacre at Tops. Millions came in. Where is it? 50 million pledged by the governor. 5.5 million given up by you. And only $230,000 been dispersed. If that was white America, it would not happen. If everywhere in this country where people have been massacred and slaughtered that don't look like me, they have leveled the ground and made it a fitting and dignified memorial to those people. Not in my community. So you wonder why we say do Black Lives Matter? Well, let me tell you something. Black lives do matter. First of all, I'm black, and my life damn sure matters. That's number one. That's number one. That's number one. No, thanks for the applause, but that's number one. But number two is all lives matter. And until we get back to that, then your life don't matter no more than mine. I was in that jail and got beat down for speaking truth to power. We got a Buffalo stadium that's being built to the tune of 600 to 700 million. That's going to be where it's at in Orchard Park. Now, anybody from Orchard Park, I got nothing against Orchard Park. I do got something against the stadium being placed there when the economic lifeblood of that should be placed in the city, where the people who need it the most could benefit from. Not the people who make fair amount of money every year charging us to park on their lawns at $20 a clip. So they're making $20,000 a year and tax-free. That's why it's not moved. But the people who in this city who need it don't get it. Why? Because the people in this city look like me. When are we going to... Fake news, you know what real fake news is? Your belief, my belief, or anybody's belief that one of us is greater or lesser than the other. That's the fake news. Because God made no mistakes when he created each and every one of us. Each and every one of us has a gift that God gave us that we should be sharing and blessing the world with, but we over here hating and racism. And you wonder why things are amiss? I am not a racist. Question is, are you? And if you can't answer that affirmatively, no, then you need to do something about it. Our next segment, the end of this, is going to be about what we can do, what we would like you to do, but you and I know in your own sphere of influence that you can start doing and saying something right now. We always talk about what happened yesterday, that's the past, and what we gonna do tomorrow. But who the hell is talking about what we need to be doing right now? Today, the only day we got, because tomorrow's gone, and God willing, I'll be waking up tomorrow. And I got the 2-minute warning, and I didn't get to none of this, I just wanted to know. But I am gonna read the scripture, because I gotta keep it scripturally sound, and I'm gonna pull out my glasses. Galatians 6:2. Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. Philippians 2:4. Not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others. And finally, 1 John 4:18. There is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. The one who fears is not made perfect in love. We are here for such a time as this to change the dynamic. It is our responsibility to walk away from this time, not saying we don't see color, but seeing the color for what it is, the beautiful panorama of God's gift to mankind. Thank you.
Everybody was good. Okay, at this time, we're going to field questions to the panelists, and anyone that has a question or a comment that they could make, there's a mic on either side.
Well, I really don't need a microphone.
Sure don't.
My name is Donna Robinson, and I am an organizer here in Buffalo. Really, I don't need a microphone. It'll help me. You can't hear me? All right, my name is Donna Robinson, and I'm an organizer here in Buffalo for Release AU people in prison. It's so nice to see so many beautiful white comrades in the audience. I am out here 10 toes down with Deacon Jerome Wright. And I am so thankful for this opportunity to discuss this openly. It shouldn't have had to come to this, tragedy on May 14th, to that massacre, for us to sit down and have this discussion. You probably can't tell just by looking at me, but I was born in 1955, and that was the beginning, to me, of like the beginning of the civil rights era. But I can remember my grandmother telling me stories about growing up in Georgia, how they were sharecroppers, and how her parents before her, they were slaves. And working with the carceral system, I don't see the difference. Even though this is supposed to be a new millennium, I don't see how we've progressed as people, as human beings. I think we need to really, honestly, take a look in the mirror at ourselves. Because at one time or another, I'm sure that all of us have had that thought, that little racist thing that goes off in your head. I know when I'm walking and somebody stopped at a red light, I'll hear them click the locks on their doors. Do I look like I'm a threat to anybody? No. But see, these are the signals. This is my reality. This is what we as African American people live with. So we need to start in the home. You have young children. My children, they're as old as Vaseline now. I'm a great-grandmother, and I've noticed that my children are procreating with your children, and we have some beautiful children. Yes, we have some beautiful children, and this is in the home. And when they go to school, we have to reinforce this, that we're all created equal in God's sight. And you just can't look at somebody and judge them or prejudge them and say, oh, this person, because I'm not always this cute. Someday I got my mean face on, but I don't need to be intimidating or to scare anybody. So we have to start in the home with the young children when they're in school and stop that school to prison pipeline. Because Leticia, holla at your girl. I get it. My daughter's incarcerated, serving 15 years to life in Bedford Hills, the maximum correctional facility for women. And I see it. Women have been given the short end of the stick. I say all the way back to the Garden of Eden. I'm just going to give it. Eve got it, and she just passed that down along with other things that women go through. So we have to think about the women. Don't forget about them. They're the seed bearers, and we can. But in my lifetime, I don't know, because look, I'm almost, But the children, these are the ones, we have to save the children. And I probably don't have a question, but I felt compelled to get up and say something, because, Jerome, you know I'm going to be here for you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I may be getting ahead of myself a little bit, but one of the themes that I've seen over the past few years, and in particular since May 14th, is the language and the concern that life in society is a zero-sum game. What should we start doing? What should we start thinking about and maybe bring to the next session as kind of like a homework assignment about how to break out of that thought process? Because it's that selfishness in my mind that seems to be one of the crucial origins for the negative energy that is pervading our society today.
The short answer is,
Can you?
the short answer is to actually live the gospel. You are Indian or Muslim, what is it? Sikh, a practicing Sikh. And just like I didn't know what you're practicing, now I know. I can respect how you, in your own religious beliefs, have dictates that say how we should be treating each other. how we should be respecting each other. We read these books, we go to these services, we listen to these sermons, we do all of the technical things except live out our beliefs. You really would, I couldn't be a racist because you gotta have power to do that. But I have been prejudiced. And you know how you stop being prejudiced? Then you don't judge people when you see them. You let them tell you who they are. And what we need to do is embrace the religion, embrace the belief, the faith that we say we have. You know what? I bet you not a single person in this audience, before they sat down in that pew, checked to see if it was sturdy. Nobody did this. If you did, let me know, please. And then sat down. Did anybody do that? No, you got more faith in whoever constructed this than in the God you say you serve when you go do that and don't look out for your brother. That's what it comes down to. It comes down to us stop playing games with this religion, stop playing games about faith. Either you believe and you're going to live it out, or you faking like a whole bunch of other people. What are we doing? What are we doing? Because you're going to walk it like we go to church on Sunday and feel good and then walk out and go to the tailgate and do everything we just prayed to God that we wasn't going to do anymore if you get me out of this. Don't we do that? Or if I let a black cat run through these pews, how many people going to jump and think superstition instead of I'm in the house of God and he got all this in control? Let's stop lying to ourselves about where we at with God. Because if you're standing with God, what did he say? Your brother's problems is your problems. Your brother's troubles is your troubles. That you should be doing those things I quoted in those verses. They're not just scriptures to sound good. They're scriptures to live by. That's what we need. Let's start living our lives like we are God's children.
Can I add? You said, just to reiterate, you asked to give you some homework for the next session, some things to think about. So first, I would say really truly think about America and think about the history, right? Because you have to know where you come from, right, to know where you're going. They say it's cliche, but it's the truth. So first, look at the history and look at how things transpired, right? And you got to really analyze, right? We can't be surface thinking. I said that during the speech. We have to really analyze where everything started. So for me, I was going to talk about this next week, but I'll just say there needs to be some reconstruction, okay? Some reconstruction, and not just down here with us, but up there. And I'm talking about Washington. So this is just a beginning to something new, right? I mean, we've been doing this for years and years, right? We've come a long way, right? But there's still so much more to do. So you take the time to look at history and look at racism and power and privilege and how it evolved and what seeds were planted for it to grow, okay? And then think about how we can break that.
Good evening, everyone. I just want to remind everybody, okay, this portion of the session right now is questions. You ask the questions, and they come up with the answer. Please do not sit there. Take the opportunity to say what's ever on your mind, ask the panel, and maybe they give you a response that you probably can feel comfortable in talking about. You just can't sit here and act like you're comfortable. You can't be. Let's have the conversation. We're here now. Aren't we? Are we not here? So you can't tell me just one, two people have something to say. That's crazy to me. We have to have the real dialogue. This is what these two mics are for. Just have the dialogue. So people, I'm asking you, come up, express yourself about what we were talking about tonight, and let's go on. Sitting here perpetrating the fraud, that's not good. That means you're suppressing whatever you have inside you. Speak now or forever hold your peace. That's all I have to say.
Good evening, everyone. I'm a retired educator, and I wanted to pose kind of a question about Attorney Russ stating that we don't have enough African Americans in law school. Now, we talked about admission to law school, which is a little difficult. You have to pay for preparatory classes, you have to pay for the LSAT, but it's beyond that, because even if you get into law school, you face racism. Now, I never went to law school, but I did do a master's program in which I faced racism. I was told that I didn't write my paper because I didn't know the meaning of semantics. And I was just in shock. I didn't know what to say to the professor. I also took a course in which I gave a presentation, and I'm an A-type person. I'm very thorough, and I was berated during that presentation. I was the only African-American female in the class, and there was a mixed-race young man in the class. At the end of the class, the student said, "Oh my gosh, he went in hard on you." And I said, "You know what? I have thick skin. As an African-American woman, if you don't have thick skin, you will not survive." Each and every day in our subconscious, you walk out your door and you're thinking, what is the day going to bring? How am I going to face this day? How am I going to be successful on this day? So I'd like to make a suggestion that there be some way that students in school can approach a panel of people with concerns of racism in the classroom. I could not go to anyone about these professors. The first course, I got a B. The second course, I got an A-. And I didn't think that was reflective of the job that I did. So we need a way that there will not be repercussions for the student to identify those who perpetuate that racism, which it reduces your ability to grow and to share. It shuts you down, and that's unfair. So we need to come up with a way to do that. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, my name is Denise Benson. I grew up here in Buffalo, New York all my life, and I experienced lots and lots of racism. I left Buffalo in the early 80s, moved up to Syracuse, and went back to school and did an internship in the dental department, and I got hired at St. Joe's Hospital there. But only way I got into that position, my boss, which was a white lady, she worked in the dental unit for 40 years. She said she sat in those meetings and listened to all the racial comments and stuff they made about not letting black people up into the dental unit. But she said she worked there for the 40 years to build herself up to get into position to hire a person of color. It just so happened, it happened to be me, and I think that the only way we can start with racism, ending it, is start with the people of your color, your color, your color. Because black people did not start racism. We're not racist people, we accept everybody. It's white people that don't accept us. I moved out in North Tonawanda. When I got back here, they sent a little kid to my house and said if I don't move, they were gonna burn a cross in front of my house. And you know what I told the little girl? Have a nice day, because I didn't care about that long as they didn't touch my doorknob, because I wasn't going nowhere, not at all. But I said only way racism is gonna stop is it start with each and every last one of us in this room. It take voices. It take, more than just talking about it.
we got to be about. And I think that's a great solution to it.
Hi, my name is Angela Morris. I've been in Buffalo. Is this on? Hi. Okay. I'm from Syracuse, Auburn, so I've been here like 4 months. I came from a racist town, prison ran town. I have a son that's incarcerated since the age of 16. He's 22 now. So we all believe the same. At the end of the day, I'm sorry. I had to hide. I had to keep my kids, my grandbaby, and hide them. Power. That's a big issue. Power. Police, COs, politics. I don't know how many of y'all have family members that are police guards. Like, my son has been beaten several times. Right now, he needs a pacemaker. He's 22, solitary, tortured. You know, I tell my kids, you got the best of both worlds. All my kids are mixed. Now, I want to eat them words. Education. I had to pull my kids out of school, my grandbaby. We had to move over here, like we got chased out of Auburn. But I want to know what I can do today. Because we can come together, but I can't trust police. I don't trust police. My kids don't trust police. My 2 oldest kids lost somebody in that massacre. We all lost somebody. But if we're going to change, we all have to come together. But what are the police, what are everybody going to do? What can we do?
Okay, so first we have to work on a mindset, right? So if we're all coming together, we can't say, I'm not going to trust the police. I mean, you could say what you want. So this is just a suggestion, right? But all police aren't the same. All white people aren't the same. All black people aren't the same. All Spanish people, and I can go on and on, Chinese, Asian. Everybody's not the same or have that same mindset as racism, right? To be racist, all right? That's something that is embedded from, your childhood and things like that. So when we look at things from that perspective, then we can start moving forward because it's okay to trust the police. There's some good police. There are. I know some. Okay? And then there's some bad police, and there's some bad white people, and some bad black people, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm gonna ask you just to work on that mindset and what you teach your children as well, especially the one that's incarcerated because he has to deal with police every day. Okay? That's it.
I think we have time for one more question, and then we'll have it closed out by Sister Eileen.
My name is Tom Mims. I believe that racism is a learned behavior. And judging by the crowd, we're all up in age now. I can guarantee you knew about racism growing up. And at some point, you might have engaged in it. But me being a dark-skinned black man at this size, my body type, I always had to lay down on the ground when the police confronted me, whether I did anything or not. And that's so humiliating, very humiliating. But I learned, I served in the Army and the Navy. I've been around the world. And I do know Europeans are somewhat different. I was treated a lot better when I was in Germany, Norway, Amsterdam, a lot of other places. But when I came back to America, things were totally different. I was like a second-class citizen. But I do know I have white friends that were totally different than anybody that was racist. They were very prejudiced. But the thing about it is, they were enablers. They would not correct a person that was prejudiced or racist. Even the bars, back when the days when I was drinking, they would say the N-word and certain things in the bar. And then they would see that I was standing there, Tom, not you. You are different.
So that, I couldn't understand that. But I do know that if you've been on this earth as long as you've been, and I can see the white and gray hair, you have a decision to make from this day point. Once you know the truth about something, you have to respond and act on it. And I decided to follow God's laws and love each and every one of you, regardless of how you think. But I need you to help in your endeavor to teach the generation behind you and ask God to forgive you and engage in some great things that you can do for this especially the city of Buffalo. We are segregated. Ted Koppel came here when a young lady got killed out there at the Thruway Plaza. We were the 4th racist city in the United States. And we're that way because it was developed that way. We fought over the jobs in Bethlehem Steel, Republic Steel, back in the day. When Jim Crow ended and everybody was trying to come north, there was a territorial battle. So everybody from black stayed on the east side, and most of the whites that lived in the neighborhoods moved out of the suburbs. But the one thing I want to say is, you have to not be an enabler when you engage in what we call sin in the faith base, as you well know. He that knoweth to do good and do it not, that is sin unto him. That's the word of God. So I'm just saying, when you know something's wrong and you don't do it, I don't know how you sleep at night, but if you can get used to doing that, you will engage in a battle in your mind and resentment for the rest of your life, believe me. But my question is, well, let me say one more thing. There's a few hints you need to know. We need to have a relationship, a cultural relationship. I'm just going to give you a few things not to do when you engage black folks. Don't tell them you have black friends. If you tell them you have black friends, they know you're distant, and that's not true. Please don't do that, And don't get upset. There's one thing you will know. When you make a black person really mad and they go off, we have a sense of what you would call medically the PSD, that you way before they had said the word. So if you piss them off and they go off and they don't care about the job they have or nothing, that's because every white person that did them wrong, you're gonna be the representative. So that's why I'm saying we have to have a relationship with each other. That way, and one thing you should do when a black person speaks to you, just don't walk by them. Say hello, how are you? Because we know we have a soul within us, and we know when you mean what you say and you don't. So it's not like we're not educated, but we have a spiritual sense within it. We know what you mean. We can tell your body language. So, but I'm just saying a relationship. If you don't know something, ask a question. And because we're human beings. Another thing I know, I have A positive blood. I can give it to anybody in this world. If you need your life saved by A positive blood and you're white, guess what? I can save your life.
Thank you very much. We have one more comment or question from Susan, and then Sister Eileen.
I wanted to just say that this is, we were challenged, all of us in the audience who are white, to make this a two-way conversation. And so I want to say, I think one of the things that those who are like me need to understand is that racism is a two-way street. And so trying to eliminate racism means that those of us who are white need to be unburdened from the legacy of white supremacy, which is, and I'm not talking about the extremists like the guy that did the Tops Massacre. I'm talking about a fundamental way of thinking that ranks people on a hierarchy of worth, that says we have to have either or thinking, that says there's only one way to think and that's like us, that this elimination of racism is not about opening the doors to the culture that we live in, North Buffalo, the West, you know, every place. It's about understanding that there really is diversity, and this diversity is rich, and it means we can learn something from one another. And so I just want you, Leticia, yeah, you mentioned the word liberation, and I was thinking about liberation for whom, from what? And when we are successful overcoming this racism, which I know that arc of history is long but bends toward justice, when we are successful doing that, I want to be in the group that feels liberated. Liberated because I am lifted from having to carry the burden of our history and our legacy and the systemic and structural racism that we see, that we all live in, free from that complicity, which means we need to take it, oh, listen to me, intentional action. I don't know, all these little buzzwords. But anyway, I want to say this ought to be a two-way street. That's really what I want to say. And, okay, that's enough. Is that enough?
Thank you so much.
Sister Eileen, you want to come up and give a benediction for us?
So I'm going to say the closing prayer, but I want to add one thing to the homework. Please, please vote. Please vote. The vote is absolutely essential. Tell 20 of your friends, get out there and vote. That's how change is going to come about, please. And now our closing prayer. So let's take a couple deep breaths, okay? Jesus, you urge us to love and serve you in others, in our friends and neighbors, strangers, and even our enemies. We pray for an end to racism, prejudice, discrimination, and all barriers that separate us from one another as sisters and as brothers. God of all peoples, may we know and honor your call to unity. Help us to seek and offer forgiveness, and through the power of the Spirit, enable us to extend and to accept healing from each other. By your grace, draw us toward your vision of one united, wonderfully diverse human family. Hear and grant us this our prayer. Amen.
Amen, sister. Thank you all for coming, and we hope that you will attend the final session next week.
Just a quick reminder, if you're driving to Trinity next week, same time, next Thursday night, our parking lot is accessible from Franklin Street between Tupper and Edward.